Bob Baffert is back at the Kentucky Derby. Will he get the win this year with Rodriguez? Stick around to find out. Hi, everyone. Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, and welcome to another Kentucky Derby Spotlight Series. This one is on Bob Baffert's entry, Rodriguez, who is coming off a victory in the Grade 2 Wood Memorial. Now, before we get into Rodriguez and Bob Baffert, I want to remind you to press that like and subscribe button to join the NYRA Bets YouTube family. Subscribing is entirely free of cost, just notifies you when new videos drop on the channel, whether those are race previews, full card analyses, handicapping and betting tutorials, weekly programs, specialty shows like this one, even live streams that we have covering late pick fives across the country. Listen, you want to press that like and subscribe button today if you care about the Kentucky Derby, the Triple Crown, Saratoga, the Breeders' Cup. We're your one-stop shop for all that good stuff, so press that like and subscribe button today. All right, well, like I said, we're focused on Rodriguez. But before we get to this very impressive front-running horse, we need to talk about Bob Baffert, who had been suspended from entering horses at Churchill Downs in the Kentucky Derby for the previous 3 years. Why, you might ask? Baffert is one of the most recognizable and successful trainers in our sport, certainly training the last two Triple Crown winners, justifying American Pharaoh. Why was he suspended? Well, it all stems from a positive test from Medina Spirit, who crossed the wire first at the Kentucky Derby back in 2021. Medina Spirit tested for an additional amount of betamethasone over the regulated amount. And betamethasone is a regulated substance. And I think that's an important thing to point out. It is a banned substance in some ways, but it is not an illegal substance to give horses. Okay, betamethasone is a perfectly allowable drug to give a horse, but it needs to be out of their system, or it needs to be at a certain level in their system come race time. And there was a little bit more in Medina Spirit's system than should have been. That resulted in a very long, protracted legal battle between Bob Baffert and Churchill Downs. Churchill Downs took the initiative of suspending him from 2 years. As that legal battle waged on, they actually tacked an additional year on. So it ended up being a 3-year suspension. Once Baffert dropped a lot of legal claims, the two sides mended fences and he came back. But this is, like I said, a part of the story that you're going to be hearing leading up to the running of the 151st Kentucky Derby, that Baffert is back. And indeed, he is back with two horses, not just Rodriguez. He also has Citizen Bull, who is the champion 2-year-old, though I think that there are some serious questions about that horse going on the 1.25 mile distance. But listen, Baffert is one thing. Let's dive in and talk about Rodriguez. And we'll continue to mention Baffert within this context of how he has decided to place this very intriguing horse, who is, it's so fascinating to me because he's sired by Authentic, who won in that COVID year, won the Kentucky Derby in the COVID year of 2020. And it's so interesting that both Authentic and Tiz the Law, who ran in that COVID year as well in 2020, has a runner in this year's race, Tiz-tastic. So very fascinating. The two first crop sires have essentially, first crop sires of 3-year-olds have entries in the starting gate of the Kentucky Derby, and they raced against each other. And so, listen, Bob Baffert is going to be the trainer that everybody's going to be talking about and focused on leading up to the Derby because of that absence, because of the fact that Medina Spirit was suspended, because of the fact he wins the Kentucky Derby a lot. He's won the Triple Crown. He's won the Preakness a lot. He's won a ton of the big races in our sport. He's arguably the most recognizable face in horse racing. When you get lampooned and spoofed on Saturday Night Live, you are part of American culture. And that is something that Bob Baffert is that no other trainer can really say that they are. So whether you like him or dislike him, he is a lightning rod in our sport. There's no two ways about that. Now, the job he's done on Rodriguez is fascinating because if you look at this horse's pedigree, Authentic, certainly a horse that won the Breeders' Cup Classic, won the Kentucky Derby, it won a lot of big races and was more than capable of getting that distance. He's sired, Authentic that is, by Into Mischief. Now, we've talked about him. Into Mischief, I don't necessarily love his offspring at 1.25 mile distance, but listen, he also, Into Mischief, sired Golden Sense. Why is that notable? Well, who won last year's Kentucky Derby? Mystic Dan, sired by Golden Sense. So, he's produced Into Mischief, that is, horses that have gone on to sire Kentucky Derby winners. Could he do another one here with Authentic? You look at the dam side pedigree, it's mostly sprint. I mean, Kayala was a turf sprinter. You look at Cherokee Run was, her sire was, again, did run dirt route races, but really throughout his career was kind of best at going one-turn miles and sprints. So it's interesting that you blend Authentic, who doesn't necessarily have the biggest distance pedigree. It's not like he's got a lot of Tappet in his background or something like that, with another horse in Kyala who is more of a sprinter. Rodriguez is a very fast horse, though. And so you see where that speed comes from. The question is going to be the distance, and I think the big question is going to be the pace scenario with him. Mike Smith is going to be aboard Rodriguez. He took over the mount for him in that Wood Memorial, and he was really high on this horse after the race. I was there in the winner's circle that day at Aqueduct, and he was, joyous coming back. He was so happy with how this horse performed, so complimentary of the grooms and so complimentary of the exercise riders in the morning who got Rodriguez ready for that big race in Aqueduct. So listen, he's an interesting horse, won the Wood Memorial, but finished second in the Robert B. Lewis, third in the San Felipe. And we really need to dive into the past performances so you can understand this a little bit better. He is a very fascinating horse because he ran in debut and lost to a horse who went on to win next time out and looked really good doing it. And then he went on to win next time out as well in Rodriguez and broke its maiden and looked so good, earned that 100 buyer speed figure, albeit came with Lasix, and wired the field. Now notice his two victories, the maiden's victory and the Wood Memorial. Notice when you look at the past performances, what do they have in common? Well, there's two things. One, they both are 100 plus buyer speed figure races. That's one thing. The other thing is, notice the ones across the running line. First at first call, first at second call, first at third call, first at the mile, first in the stretch. He's a front runner. When you rate him off speed, that's not really his game. He doesn't really pass horses. And what is so fascinating is, leading up to the Kentucky Derby and throughout the early stages of the Derby Trail, Rodriguez was kind of thought of as being maybe the second tier in Baffert's stable of potential Derby entries. You had horses like Barnes and Citizen Bull, who were more highly regarded. And yet it was Rodriguez that was entering in these races like the Robert B. Lewis and the San Felipe. And it seemed as if he was given the instructions, sit off your more favored stablemate. Okay, sit off of Citizen Bull in the Robert B. Lewis. Sit second, let Citizen Bull get the lead. In the San Felipe, let Barnes get the lead. You sit off. And as a result, he never really got the trip he was supposed to get because he was a need-the-lead type of horse. They send him to the Wood Memorial, blinkers come off, and son of a gun, he goes straight to the front in a race where there should have probably been more speed than there was. Sand Devil, who is a New York bred horse, who's more of a sprinter, decided to rate off that day for some ungodly reason. But nevertheless, we'll talk about those tactics another day. But nevertheless, Rodriguez was able to get a pretty easy lead over a horse like Captain Cook, was able to set the fractions he wanted, and was able to draw off and win. And Grande for Todd Pletcher, who finished second, made a little bit of a late charge, but never really threatened Rodriguez at all, who was able to take him gate to wire. But he was also able to set his own fractions while going a mile and an eighth. This leads to, I think, a lot of speculation about what's going to happen exactly in the Kentucky Derby. Because here's the thing. Rodriguez is not going to be able to set the pace like he did in the Wood Memorial the first Saturday in May. There's going to be a lot of other horses who want to be up front, including his stablemate, Citizen Bull, who has never shown any ability to pass horses. So it'll be interesting to see how Baffert decides to manage these two. I know there's still speculation of whether or not Citizen Bull is going to actually go to the Kentucky Derby. Might he just point to the Preakness instead? We'll see, because these are two horses that have the exact same running style in Rodriguez and Citizen Bull. They like to go out up front. They're fast horses. We'll see how far their speed can take them. The problem is that you have a lot of other horses in this race who also want to go to the lead. So when you talk about the early pace scenario in the Kentucky Derby this year, you're talking about East Avenue, who got the blinkers on last time out, and for Brendan Walsh, clearly is a horse that needs to be up front. You have a horse like American Promise for D. Wayne Lucas. Talk about a throwback to the 1990s for somebody like me, seeing D. Wayne and Bob Baffert going at each other like they did back in the 90s. That's a great rivalry, and one that I know there's a lot of mutual respect for. But it is interesting. American Promise, another horse that wants to be up at the front. Owen Almighty, who I think everyone thinks should be in the Pat Day Mile, but everybody got Derby fever around the horse. And so there he's entered in that race. He's going to be up front. Then you have a horse like Rodriguez, obviously Citizen Bull if he enters. So now that's 5 horses that are going to be up there on the lead, wanting to be part of the early pace scenario. Now, if one of those horses were to drop out, let's say, you go, well, maybe Citizen Bull decides not to run. Well, then you have a horse like Neo Equos, who draws in for Saffie Joseph. Well, that horse only has one way to win, which is go straight to the front. So there's a lot of speed in this race. And we have seen the last couple of years that the horses that are leading the cavalry charge into the first turn, they're really nowhere to be found come mid-stretch. They're going to fade back, and those fractions just get way too fast. Obviously, we'll have to see how post position draws out. That's going to be a big factor in terms of determining tactics, I would imagine, for some of these horses. But you look at a lot of these runners, they have to go. That's their only option. And in the Kentucky Derby, you need to get good position early, and that means using up a lot of your horse early to get into that ideal spot. So Rodriguez is going to be a horse that's going to go to the front under Mike Smith. The question is, can he get there? Is he fast enough? I think he's absolutely fast enough to get to the front. I think if Mike goes, I need to get to the front no matter what, he can get to the front. He's that fast. I don't doubt that at all. I think he's actually been held back in the Robert B. Lewis, the San Felipe. It's not that he wasn't faster than Barnes. It's not that he wasn't faster than Citizen Bull. I don't think he was given the opportunity to be faster than those 2 horses. I think he can be on any given day. So I think he's fast enough to get to the front. The question is whether or not he can sustain that run the whole way. And if he draws a little further outside, that might be better in some ways. It's interesting. If he's inside, then he's really got to go. He'll be part of that first charge into the first turn, I would imagine. If he's outside, maybe he can sit off a little bit. But listen, if you're inside, you can save a little bit of ground. But I'd imagine they're going to be stacked probably 2-3 across going into that first turn for the lead. And I would imagine he's going to be one of those 2 or 3 horses. I would imagine East Avenue, American Promise, those are horses that are really fast. Owen Almighty, he's a very fast horse as well. Is he fast enough to get up there? We'll see. But there's going to be intentionality between for all of these horses. So, listen, we could talk until we're blue in the face about the pace scenario. We'll just have to wait to see how it actually plays out. But on paper, there's a lot of speed in this race. Because there's a lot of speed, I'm not necessarily bullish on Rodriguez's chances to win this race. And the reason for that is simply the pedigree is a little bit of an unknown with Authentic, okay? And if you dig into Authentic's pedigree, it's not a huge amount of distance. I mean, Into Mischief, and even then the influence of his dam Authentics was mostly sprint. So it's not as if you have this huge distance family in the background of Authentic's pedigree. You have a little bit later on, but not in the immediate family. And so you look at the same thing with Rodriguez. And again, there's just not a lot of distance that's baked into this. But that said, obviously, listen, his dad got the distance. His dad won the Breeders' Cup Classic. So Authentic, it's unknown what type of sire he's going to be. And that's what makes it so exciting. We'll see the same thing with Tiz the Law, with a runner like Tiz-tastic, who we'll highlight in this series as well. But I think Rodriguez, big question is going to come down to price and pace. Honestly, how do you project the pace? And at what price are you willing to take a horse like Rodriguez with that pace scenario? If you think he can get up on the front end and run relatively uncontested fractions, if he can get away with something like a 47 to the half mile, which I don't think is going to happen, but if he can get away with something like that, maybe you think he can hold on. Maybe he gets brave up on the front end. Maybe he's a horse that just is a completely different animal when he's up front, and that's very possible. If you think it's going to be a more contested pace scenario, then you're going to want to take a much bigger price on him. And I think that there's going to be a lot of money flowing through the Baffert horses just because name recognition, him being back after the 3-year suspension. I think both Rodriguez and Citizen Bull may get overbet relative to their odds of winning the race. So, again, these are all things to keep in mind, factors to consider when you're analyzing the race and determining whether or not to use Rodriguez. Well, listen, thank you so much for tuning into this Kentucky Derby Spotlight Series video on Rodriguez. We'll have a lot more throughout the week and a lot more great content up here on NYRA Bets YouTube. So like and subscribe today. All right, friends, that'll do it for me. My name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and profitable day at the races and reminding you it's now post time.